Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Chapter 6. And in the first part of Chapter 6, we're going to focus on community-based corrections for juveniles. So these are going to be correctional programs that occur outside of a secure facility located in the community where the delinquent lives. This is separate from adult corrections. There are community-based corrections for adults as well. Again, juveniles have their own separate and distinct program of community corrections. The two don't intermingle. In order to be able to be placed in a community correction program, there's some criteria that has to be met. First and foremost, no violent offenses will make it into community corrections. There has to be minimal victims. It can't be a large number of victims. No weaponry can be used. If there's any kind of weapon used, you're not going to get a community correction outcome. You can't have any prior arrests. This has to be your first offense. No prior adjudications, and no prior probations. So community-based sanctions for juveniles are specific to early nonviolent offenders that don't use weapons. And this is the direction you want to go with juveniles rather than immediately putting them into a formal secure institution. We want to do community-based corrections whenever and wherever we can. So how do we choose which one, what community correction? It's going to depend on a lot of things. First of all, what's your IQ level? What's your intelligence level? Is going to dictate where you go versus where you don't. What about your social skills? Are you where you should be able to socially function at your age, or are you behind? That's going to dictate things. What's your family situation? Right? Do you have an intact family that is, taking care of you, that you have a good relationship with, or not? And then, of course, this always drives every single thing in the world of criminal justice is going to be resources and funding. What kind of resources and funding do we have for local community corrections? Do we have enough room to accommodate another individual? Enough room and money? So the first thing we're going to talk about is juvenile probation. And this is probation specific to minors who have been adjudicated delinquent. So the youth is going to be released into the custody of their parents. They're going to live in the community, right? But they're going to have a regular, consistent relationship with their probation officer. Juvenile probation officers have much more engagement with juvenile probationers than do adult probation officers with adult probationers. There are going to be rules, there are going to be guidelines that the adolescent has to follow. Because the point here is you want to protect society from any sort of deviance elicited by the adolescent, while at the same time balancing the issues of the child, providing guidance and treatment. So a juvenile probation officer, who you'll hear me refer to this as a JPO, is different than an adult probation officer. You'll hear me refer to that as a PO. So the JPO acts as a surrogate parental figure, okay? Whereas an adult PO is much more of a taskmaster, okay? Not to say that there aren't adult POs that are supportive, there are, right? But adult POs are they treat you like an adult, that, I expect you to behave like an adult. Whereas a JPO is, I know you're still a kid and you need some guidance and you need some help, and that's part of my job, is to guide you and to help you live a law-abiding, successful life. The JPO is going to coordinate treatment for the child under their charge. A lot of times this is going to be referred to as deferred adjudication, which is what we call informal probation. And this is when the juvenile doesn't go before the juvenile court. They're not adjudicated delinquent. Okay. Rather, this is when they get taken into custody by police and we divert them into treatment, we divert them into probation rather than going before the judge. So they're going to be put on probation with rules and guidelines that have to be followed. But there's no direct supervision. There's no direct supervision. If they offend, however, they are going to be taken off of probation and they will be put into a more hefty circumstance, a more hefty outcome. Deferred adjudication usually only lasts a short period of time. Okay. Common probation conditions for juveniles. So what does probation for an adolescent look like? Well, you have to attend school regularly. You can't be caught truant, right? If you have a part-time job, you need to be attending work on the hours that you're scheduled. You can't just call off all the time. There cannot be any alcohol or substance abuse, and there will be urine testing. You must submit to random drug screenings. You cannot deny them. Okay. You have to check in with your JPO regularly. Pretty regularly. You're going to call. You're going to meet face to face. You're going to talk. How are things going? What's going on? Blah blah blah. You're probably going to have to attend some kind of counseling or treatment. You can't associate with other offenders of any age, right? But certainly not delinquents. Don't commit any crimes, obey your curfew. If don't get caught breaking curfew. You cannot have any weapons possessions. And if you caused any kind of harm, you have to pay restitution to fix the harm that you caused. You may have to perform community service, and you have to listen to your parents. So that's a lot of conditions. And it's a much different set of conditions than an adult will undergo. Obviously, an adult offender is not going to have to listen to their parents, and parents are going to play a big role here, especially if we have issues with the juvenile being incorrigible, that they don't follow rules, they're defiant, they're disrespectful, they swear at their parents, they hit their parents, right? The parents are going to have a lot of say here, with the JPO and say, JP is going to say, how's it going? Have we had any incidents? Tell me what happened this week. Or, hey, he's great. He's not doing X, Y, and Z. Or, I told him to clean his room up on Monday and he told me to fuck off and then he tried to smack me in the face, right? So there's going to be a dialogue there, and it's going to impact what happens to that juvenile on probation, based on all of these conditions. I think it's really important to say out loud that probation is a privilege, not a right. I don't know that a lot of people on probation of any age view it that way, but they should. It is a diversionary tactic to keep you out of secure confinement. Anybody in the world would rather be on probation than in secure confinement. I think people who are on probation, both adults and children, sometimes forget that you're getting a break here. So recognize the opportunity for what it is, follow the conditions of the probation and appreciate it, because you are not entitled to it. There's going to be a probation agreement which outlines the expectations for the juvenile while on probation. So they're going to put everything in writing and say, here's what we expect you to do, here's what you can't do, etc. The juvenile has to sign it and acknowledge it. Anytime a juvenile doesn't submit to the conditions of probation, they are subject to revocation. And what that means, what probation revocation is, simply that it is removed as an option and you are now going to be sent to a secure facility. You have violated the terms of the agreement. You're not adhering to them. Therefore, this privilege is gone and you are now going to a secure confinement facility. So what are the roles and the responsibilities of the juvenile probation officer? They oversee intake decisions, and they make a decision. And juvenile probation officers, like police officers, they have a lot of discretionary decision making here. So the attitude of the child coming through the door is going to be very influential about that intake decision. Do we handle this informally, or do we go through a formal process and take you before the court? They're going to prepare pre-sentence investigation reports, which is going to review the case at hand. What did the juvenile do? What's their history? Have they been in trouble before? Have they never been in trouble before? What's their psychological status? Do they have any diagnoses? Are they in treatment? Should they be in treatment if they're not in treatment? What's their social history? What are their treatment needs? The JPO is also going to act as a liaison for the court. So they're going to go into the court and report on their caseload to the juvenile judge and say, here's the status of my caseload. Here's what, here's these 8, here's what they're doing. Some are doing well, some are not doing well, blah, blah, blah. And they're going to be that bridge of communication between the actual application of the probation and the actual juvenile justice court system. They prepare dispositional plans. These are going to be plans that are imposed on the juvenile to outline the entire course of treatment. They're going to make decisions about progress. They're going to monitor progress, and if they're monitoring your progress, they may be able to make a decision and say, you've been doing great, you've adhered to everything that we've outlined, I'm going to terminate your probation early and you're going to be done. Or they could revoke it or they could modify it. So it really is dependent on the circumstance, but they have a lot of power here over the adolescent who is on probation. And that's something every adolescent on probation should probably be aware of. Right. They also oversee aftercare. So when probation is complete, they will support or provide support and any sort of supervision or aftercare that is mandated by the court. There is also something called intensive supervision probation. This is referred to as ISP. Again, adult offenders can have ISP, as can juvenile offenders. The two do not intermingle. They are two completely separate approaches. Sticking with the juvenile ISP, it functions very differently than just regular probation. ISP probation caseloads are going to be very small because that means that probation officer has to spend a lot of time, energy, and resources on each individual case. That's what makes it intensive. So they're going to have a much smaller caseload. There's going to be more interaction between the JPO and the juvenile. There's going to be more points of contact, more checking in. And there's going to, the conditions are usually stricter, and any non-compliance are going to result in revocation. Okay. And that revocation will result in a non-residential sanction, right? Meaning that, you're going to go to a secure facility. Another kind of probation is called shock probation, and shock probation is where, it's reserved for more serious offenses, where probation alone doesn't seem to be adequate as a consequence for what the juvenile did. So they're going to briefly place the juvenile in a secure facility. That's the shock, right? That you're going to go to a secure lockdown facility and have to stay there for a period of time. It's usually a short period of time. And then you will be released to probation, regular probation. But this is to underscore, the severity of what's next if you keep offending. And it's to influence compliance. There are secure facilities, and juveniles are remanded to secure facilities. There's a number of options. We have detention facilities, boot camps, group homes, temporary placement, long-term placement. There's a lot of different methods of secure facility. There's also school probation. School probation is where there is a probation officer who is assigned to your school, and they will be on site at your school. And they will work with school administrators, and there will be heavy oversight of your behavior within the school. House arrest is another option. Again, this is an option for both adults and juveniles. Again, completely separate, meaning that you have probation conditions and you can't leave the house. I want to introduce the concept of BARGE, which stands for Balanced and Restorative Justice Initiatives. And BARGE is an approach to consequences for juvenile delinquency. And it's this idea of, it focuses on community safety, it focuses on accountability for the individual who broke the law, and competency development so that we can minimize future delinquent actions, right? That we want you to be responsible, we want you to be capable, autonomous, and give you those skills that you need to be all of those things so that we see a decrease in delinquent behavior. When BARGE initiatives are introduced, there's a lot of emphasis with juveniles on mediation between the victim and the juvenile who offended. Sitting down, the person who was the victim has to agree to it. There will be a third-party mediator, neutral mediator, and there will be mediation so that the victim can explain to the juvenile, this is the harm that you caused. And whether it's financial, physical, emotional, or all three, this is how my life has changed as a result. This is the damage you caused. This is the aftermath of what happened for me. Why did you do this? Do you understand how angry and frustrated I am? And the juvenile gets a chance to look their offender in the eye and be held accountable and be held culpable and have to explain themselves with a third-party mediator there to make sure that everything is safe and everything is calm and it doesn't get out of hand. Restitution and community service are also big BARGE initiatives, that you've done something wrong, you've done a harm, so you need to make up for it in some capacity. There are often victim impact statements utilized with BARGE, which is very similar to the mediation, where the victim can sit down and say, this is the harm that you caused, damage that was done physically, emotionally, financially. We talked about mediation. We've talked about restitution. Community service is very common. They will be given a required set of hours where they have to do work to improve the community. It can be anything from like picking up trash to cleaning up graffiti to working at shelters, things of that nature. There's also counseling and specialized treatment. So they may be put into a day treatment program where They report during the day for school. They get some vocation training, but they also get counseling at the same time. Foster care is another option that is at the disposal of community-based corrections, where the child is removed from their home and they are put with foster parents, where there will be more structure, better guidance, better supervision. This is it can be used for delinquents, especially for incorrigible children whose parents can't manage them. But it can also be used for status offenders, our mins, pins, chins, or children of incarcerated parents, where both parents are incarcerated and there is nowhere to put them. We also have the option of group homes, and group homes are going to care for juveniles who have been adjudicated delinquents. It's a very structured lifestyle. You're going to go to school, you're going to have work, there's going to be chores, and there's going to be supervision around the clock in the group home. Wilderness programs are another option that are available, and these are programs that are literally going to take kids out into the wilderness to emphasize survival skills, physical, mental challenges. It's going to keep them busy, it's going to keep them out of trouble, but it's also going to develop a sense of self-esteem, a sense of value, a skill set they didn't have before, more autonomy, independence, and self-reliance, and try and guide them away from the negative environment in which they've lived. Aftercare is going to be evaluation and supervision that is post-probation. And we talked about this before, that it's determinate and indeterminate. It's going to depend on the circumstances of the individual.